Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Basel Pod. I'm Sam Basel, joined alongside Ohm Brown. And Ohm, we're 4 days removed from the 2025 MLB Trade Deadline. So we're going to be talking about, since we're 4 days removed, we're going to be talking about some of our favorite trades, a specific focus on some of our teams, that being the Sox, the Mets, and even a little bit of Yankees talk. And just talking about, how some of these teams, maybe they unloaded the farm too early. Maybe they really built themselves up for a playoff run this year. And maybe some other teams acquired enough prospects to have them set for, the next decade or so. So, first off, how's it going? How's your summer been? And how you feeling about the Sox right now?
I'm doing good. Summer's been good. A lot of good weather. Been able to do some stuff with my family that came over from India. That was great. Sox are hot right now. They've won. They're finally over. They're not teetering in that 500 level. They've won a bunch of games, and as of now, they're in the playoff picture and within striking distance in the division.
Yeah, absolutely. As of recording this, that being the evening of August 4th, the Red Sox are 62 and 51. They're in second place in the American League East, 3 games behind the Blue Jays. But as you said, they are in a prime position for one of those 3 wildcard spots. And I would like to start off with the Sox, kind of a breakdown of some of the trades that they've made recently, but specifically with the probably biggest non-deadline trade that was made earlier this season, that being on June 5th, sending Rafael Devers to the San Francisco Giants. Since then, the Sox have been 25 and 15 since sending Rafael to San Fran. Obviously, you talked about it a lot on
Yep.
on the blog. Make sure you check out some of these recaps that Ohm's been putting out. A couple weeks ago, you also put out, kind of a thought on, a month long retrospective on where the Sox have been since then. Feeling a little bit better. Obviously, it still stings though.
Yeah.
Obviously, seeing a guy that Boston has kind of tried to build up for the foreseeable future, just send him off kind of unceremoniously.
hmm
I would say, but things are looking up for Boston. So, almost 2 months now removed. How are we feeling about this trade?
Yeah, it's interesting because you can see both sides of it, and there's a lot of different reasons why they made the trade. First of all, his attitude towards not playing in the field and then being asked to play first base was not a winning mentality at all, and it definitely wasn't something that a playoff team should have. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, Devers was coming off probably one of the best months of his career, you could say. And the timing of it, they just swept the Yankees. They took 5 out of 6 in both the series that they played the Yankees in, and he was hitting well. But also Roman Anthony and Marcelo Meyer, their two top prospects, had been called up at this time, and that's not necessarily an example you want to have the future of the team be under. And then there's also his contract. He's owed 250 million over the next 8 years for a guy who defensively has never been good. That's not necessarily the greatest contract in the world. And considering that hit first guys typically fall off at the end of their contracts, you could see the logic on why they traded him. The timing, I argue, is probably the worst of the season. Um, and the haul they got back for him was pretty mediocre at best. They got the Giants to take the remaining contract, but that was really about it.
Yeah.
Um, and then they just sent James Tibbs, the Giants' first round pick last season, who was the Red Sox number 5 overall prospect. He's an outfielder. They just sent him over to the Dodgers for Dustin May, who is a rental and maybe their 4th starter at best right now.
Yeah, it feels to me like the Devers trade was more about getting rid of a guy than it was just acquiring something.
Yeah.
It was just about unloading a situation that you kind of felt like was about to explode if it hadn't already exploded, right?
Yeah.
Obviously there was the whole position struggle between him and Alex Bregman, and obviously, Devers' willingness to play first base pretty quickly in San Francisco kind of just shows that
Yeah.
that
For
refusal
sure.
was less about uh, an uncomfortableness with the position and more of a a frustration with the front office. So for you, I
Yeah.
mean, when have you ever seen a let's dump this guy trade kind of pan out? Not even talking about what the Red Sox have done since then, but I
Yeah.
mean, like just in the past, like have you ever seen that being set up for success?
I mean, you typically see it with veterans that you want to get off of like their last, say, 3 years of their contract where they're not panning out. And typically you'll see, like, for example, the Red Sox did this with David Price. They threw him in the Mookie Betts trade, had the Dodgers eat about half of his contract. And, that's also a reason why the return wasn't great, but they saved half of his contract.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, but it's so hard to like find a comparison for this trade because he's not an aging veteran. He's a uh, likely, I mean, he's probably the best hitting DH in the league aside from Shohei Ohtani. You could make the argument for Kyle Schwarber for sure, but he's a top three hitter at his position, and he's just 28 years old.
Yeah,
And to be
absolutely.
dumped, it's just honestly, it's a one of a kind deal, and you're not going to see a lot of these types of trades in the future.
Absolutely. And if you're a team, any team looking at what went down this June, I mean, none of them are hoping to be in a
Yeah,
position like that ever again.
for sure.
We might talk about a team that could find themselves in a position in the next couple of years, but we'll get to that later. You mentioned James Tips, the Giants prospect
Yeah,
that Boston took in the Devers trade. He was sent to the Dodgers
he was.
on July 31st with Zach Earhart, so that the Red Sox could get pitcher Dustin May. That's the first trade that I want to talk about that happened specifically around deadline time, that I want to talk about. So for you, I mean, getting May for these two prospects, how do you feel like Boston stacked up here? Before I get that, let me also mention that the same day Boston acquired left-handed pitcher Steven Matz from the St. Louis Cardinals for first base prospect Blaze Jordan. So 3 prospects sent out west and further west for 2 pitchers. Overall, how do you feel like the Red Sox did?
Yeah, so they're not necessarily bad moves at all. Like Matz was a career starter, and now he's in the bullpen. The Red Sox did need bullpen help, and you'll take bullpen help for a contender any day of the week, no matter how good or bad the pitcher is. And May, they did need starting rotation help. Garrett Crochet's been an ace. Ryan Bayo and Lucas Giolito have really picked it up honestly, since the Devers trade. Just coincidentally, those two guys have stabilized the middle of that rotation, but we've seen Walker Buehler not really pan out. They need that fourth guy, and I'm assuming GM Craig Breslow saw something in his advanced metrics because May does still his stuff is still really good. He hasn't exactly had that much success this year, but he's also coming off of a couple of seasons where he hasn't played due to, I believe it was another Tommy John surgery and then an emergency esophagus surgery that he had last season. But it also doesn't move the needle. They need, in my opinion, I think they need a true number two. What Bayo and Giolito have done this year is great, but I would rather have a guy, for example, like Merrill Kelly, who the Rangers traded for. Um, and the Rangers just gave up some prospects who none of them were inside the top 100 at all. And Kelly has a 3.22 ERA, has World Series pitching experience, and he would have been the number two. And I just think that the moves are fine, but the teams around the Red Sox got a lot better than the Red Sox got.
Yeah.
So while this past weekend they swept the Astros, they're on a 5-game win streak heading in from before the deadline till now. I just don't know how long that's going to last because you're trying to count on, obviously, Crochet. He's been amazing, but he's never pitched in high leverage games as a starter down the stretch. And you're already seeing him put on an innings limit. He was supposed to start this past Friday. His start got pushed back to Monday. So they're trying to build him up towards, having more rest and being fresh for October. But I just would have liked to see them go get just an impact number two arm instead of what maybe is a fourth or fifth starter at best.
Yeah, absolutely. And outside of pitching, I mean, is there anywhere you feel like the Red Sox could have focused on too to help them, kind of get ahead of some of these other teams? Like looking at the wild card race right now, they're in the first wild card spot, 2 games out. The Yankees are a game and a half behind them. 2 games behind them are the Seattle Mariners, and then 2 games out of the wild card, position are the Texas Rangers. So out of those 3 teams, the Yankees, Mariners, and Rangers, I mean, where do you feel like they could have improved to get an edge over those 3 specifically?
Yeah, so obviously starting pitching, it is what it is, but they really needed a first baseman, I thought. And what Abraham Toro and Romy Gonzalez have done this year has been phenomenal. Gonzalez has especially been just mashing left-handed pitching. But those guys also don't really move the needle for me. And we saw the Mariners make a couple of big trades. I know one of them we're likely going to talk about later, which was Eugenio Suarez going back to Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
But his teammate in Arizona, Josh Naylor, was probably the top first baseman on the market, if not for Ryan O'Hearn, one of those 2 guys. They're like 1A and 1B. He got sent off to Seattle a couple of days before the trade deadline. And he's had, he's a streaky hitter, but he has, he's with the Diamondbacks, he hit 292. He's been getting, he's always hit. Like, that's who he is. He's also a lefty, and he would have definitely just replaced the Tristan Casas position that they had go down when Casas blew his knee out. But the fact that another contender like the Mariners got him, the Mariners are, I said this in my season preview, they didn't really make a lot of off-season moves. I didn't know what they were doing, but they went out and got the Diamondbacks corner infielders, who I think were probably, if not the top 2 bats, definitely they're both in the top 5 for deadline hitters. The fact that they got both on top of their already elite starting rotation, I think that I wouldn't bet against them down the stretch versus the Red Sox, just because they have more thump, they have more firepower, they have the better rotation, and they just have more talent, I think, on the field and more veteran experience. And in October, that's really what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that Suarez deal, just get into the full details because, why not?
Yeah.
Let's just transition right into that. So the Diamondbacks got Tyler Locklear, first baseman, right-hand pitcher Hunter Cranton, right-hand pitcher Juan Burgos, and the Mariners got third baseman Eugenio Suarez, which you mentioned to me earlier today while we were prepping. This is his second stint with the Mariners.
Yep.
He was on the team back in 2022 and 2023. So, quick return for Suarez there. I mean, not only are we talking about, these teams competing for wild card spots together, but I mean, this is a potential matchup in the wild card round, right? As things
Yeah.
currently stand. So for you, where would Suarez kind of, make the Red Sox kind of pay for not trying to acquire him at the deadline?
Yeah, so Suarez, he's always hit for power, and his average this year, 243. That's not great. It's also not bad. But what really gets me with him is he's got 36 home runs and 87 RBI. Like, he is the perfect middle of the order bat that the Red Sox, I wouldn't say they need, but for the fact that he wasn't that expensive, the Mariners didn't um, part with any like big time prospects. They definitely could have gotten this deal done, and there were rumors that, hey, if they got this deal done, he would play first base. And they need a right-handed bat. Suarez has been one of the best hitters in the league. He's just been hitting the cover off the baseball. You can always use that type of guy in your lineup, and the fact that he went to a team that is competing with you neck and neck for the wild card race, it hurts, frankly.
Absolutely. And staying in the American League, staying actually in the wild card race, let's talk about what the Yankees did as well. Again, the Yankees, another team. It's going to be a trend that we're going to be talking about in the rest of this podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
They're one of three teams that we're going to talk about today that just completely unloaded their farm system here. So they made two big trades, dealing two catchers to the Pittsburgh Pirates, that being Rafael Flores and Edwin Perez, along with left fielder Brian Sanchez, all three of those guys in the Yankees farm system, for right-handed pitcher David Bednar out of Pittsburgh. And then they're unloading a fourth catching prospect, along with that being Jesus Rodriguez, along with Tristan Bierling and third baseman Parks Harbor, all three of those guys prospects. Oh, excuse me, as well as left-handed pitching prospect Carlos De La Rosa to the San Francisco Giants for Camilo Doval. Camilo Doval, obviously, the big story for that acquisition was that he blew the game for the Yankees against the Marlins on Saturday in a 10-12 loss. But I mean, it's one of those things that people are going to point and laugh at, and they're gonna highlight that like, oh man,
especially because it's the Yankees too.
Yeah, but it's like you're gonna blow saves. You're gonna blow. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna have
that's natural.
It's just a bad game to have a bad game.
Yeah, just my first game in the new uniform. Bednar actually did not help that cause earlier in that game either. But I mean, both of these guys have made all-star teams, and you're combining this with the fact that the Yankees have a stud in the bullpen in Luke Weaver. He's been hurt this year, but he was really big for them in their World Series run. And then they also got in the offseason Devin Williams from the Brewers, who was one of the top closers in the league. He struggled early this year, but he's shown some signs of being himself as of recently. And I mean, if everything goes right for the Yankees, that's four legit closers that they have. And that's like, the Red Sox have one legit closer that I would trust, and that's Aroldis Chapman. And he's had the best year of his career, arguably. But to have four guys that you can go to in any part of the game, especially in the postseason, because managers are so aggressive nowadays, where this does give the Yankees manager Aaron Boone the flexibility to say, "Hey, I'll bring out one of these guys in the sixth inning, knowing that I have the other three for the rest of the game and for the next game." That's a really good weapon for a manager. We'll see how Aaron Boone can use them, because frankly, I don't think he's that good of a manager. He's caught a lot of heat recently, but those are, in my eyes, two of the biggest additions, just because you can never have enough bullpen help, and the fact that they got two borderline elite closers that's dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. And to correct myself real quick, that the score of that game was 13-12 in favor of the Marlins. In 9 innings. Wow, that's a lot of runs put up in 9 innings.
Yeah.
But as you said, I mean, there's a lot more. We got a lot more time with these guys. Yankees fans,
Yeah.
have a lot more time with these guys, and so Bednar, 2 earned runs in 1.2 innings. Duvall, obviously the big one earned run in a third of an inning. But when these guys are at their best, what kind of stuff should Yankees fans be excited to see them throw?
So personally, just because I like guys who throw absolute heat, I like Duvall. I've always liked Duvall since he's come up. He throws in the hundreds. He'll get it up to, I think, around 103. Has a really good slider on top of that. It is worth noting that last year he was demoted in the Giants bullpen, but this year he's picked it up. He's looked like himself. And I mean, they can do so many different things because all these guys are different types of pitchers. And Bednar, he's more of your just traditional like closer, come in and he doesn't have the heat. I mean, all major leaguers have heat, but he doesn't have the triple digits. But he's still able. He's a two-time All-Star. He's still able to get saves, and like to have the variety that they have in their bullpen is really good because Williams has his devastating airbender changeup. Weavers is a former starter. He's got a little mix of pitches that have been really good. He gets up into like the 98 area, and they just have a lot of options, and all those guys do different things really well.
Absolutely. And the big thing I wanted to focus on too in this trade, outside of what the Yankees are getting, is the Pirates, right? They get 3 prospects, 2 of them being catchers, and then left fielder Brian Sanchez. The big question for the Pirates, obviously, is how they are trying to how they're trying to keep, or how they're trying to brace themselves for the eventual, departure of Paul Skenes, right? I mean, obviously he's going to enter pre-arbitration very soon. And this is the kind of the big moment, right? Where it's like, do we double down and we make this our guy for, the rest of his career, or do we kind of just let him go? And so for you, how does a move like this, along with anything else that they might have done at the deadline, kind of shown you what they're thinking with Skenes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that anytime when you trade your closer, you're building for the future. And Paul Skenes, he doesn't need a contract right now per se, but he's going to get really expensive the way he's been pitching. It's just one of the greatest starts to a career. And having more pieces in the farm, and they have the number 1 prospect in all of baseball right now, Connor Griffin. He's an infielder. And they have some young pitching on the rise. I know Jared Jones had Tommy John surgery early in the year, but he's still an intriguing option out of the rotation. They have a couple different avenues that they could go down, but knowing how they've been cheap in the past and how the trades haven't been the greatest, if I'm Paul Skenes, I'm not signing there. Like, they're just not a very well-run organization, and they're going to get a lot for him once they trade him. It's just, when do they trade him? They have the ability to get a lot, like just an unheard of amount of prospects and capital if they trade him, say, next year, because he's going to have the team control. But I think they would definitely hold out until he has at least 1 or 2 years left of control, just because their pipeline is really good, and they have the number 1 prospect coming up.
Absolutely. Yeah. So maybe 2026, Sam and Ohm doing the 2026 trade deadline show. We might be talking about where Paul Skenes ends up next. But until then, we got a couple more trades in the National League. Well, actually interleague trades, but talking about the National League teams. Philly making a trade with Minnesota. They sent off 2 prospects to the Twins, catcher Eduardo Tate and right-hand pitcher Mick Abel. And then the Phillies get right-handed pitcher Juan Duran, and then Mason Miller to the Mason Miller to the Padres, along with J.P. Sears. In exchange, the Pirates sent to the Athletics 3 prospects: Henry Baez, Duarniel Nunez, and shortstop Leo DeVries. Both of those trades. Phillies getting Duran and Padres getting Miller and Sears. Who do you feel like got off better on that one?
I would definitely say the Padres. Mason Miller is one of the most electric closers in the game. They both are, but Miller, he's a two-time All-Star, and he has the potential to be converted into a starter. He came up as a starter with the A's, and there's been rumors that the Padres may convert him into a starter. And he also has 4 years of team control. And I mean, anytime you trade the number 3 prospect in the whole league, which is Leo DeVries, like you're gonna get someone good back for him. And Mason Miller makes that bullpen probably one of the best bullpens in history, honestly. The Padres had 3 of the 5 all-stars, all-star relievers in the NL: Jason Adam, their closer, Robert Suarez, and I believe his name is Adam Morjan, if I'm remembering correctly. But to add a 4th all-star reliever that's just nuts. And they didn't even flip Robert Suarez or starting pitcher Dylan Cease at the deadline, which there were a lot of rumors that, once they got Sears and Miller that they would, but they kept both of those guys. And, to have a lineup that backs that with the guys like Manny Machado, who's still hitting really well, Fernando Tatis Jr., sophomore Jackson Merrill, like they're going to make some noise in the playoffs. It's just, can they get past the Dodgers and can they get past the Phillies? I don't know, but they've made the moves, and if I'm a Padres fan, that I'd be pretty excited for that, because that's going to be a really, really good team in San Diego.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very tight race in the NL West there. And then finally, I wanted to cap it off with my New York Mets. So this part, honestly, is kind of you trying to motivate me as to why I should be excited about these moves that the Mets have made. Honestly, you don't need to try too hard. I like what they've done, but try and convince me to get those doubts out of my head. So on July 25th, if we can go back a little bit before the deadline, the Mets got left-hand pitcher Gregory Soto from the Orioles for, again, 2 prospects: right-hand pitcher Wellington Aracena and right-hand pitcher Cameron Foster. Then on the 30th, they made 2 trades. They got, with the Cardinals, they sent 3 prospects: shortstop Jesus Baez, right-hand pitcher Frank Elisalt, right-hand pitcher Nate Dome, for right-hand pitcher Ryan Helsley. That same day, they sent Blade Tilwell, Jose Buto, and prospects center fielder Drew Gilbert for Tyler Rogers. And then on the deadline, they sent Ramon Gomez, Anthony Nunez, and Chandler Marsh for veteran Cedric Mullins. Well, veteran, he's been playing since 2018, but I'd consider him, pretty well experienced in the major leagues. So for you, out of those 4 or 5 trades that the Mets have made, which one should Mets fans be most excited for?
Yeah, I think it's 2 of those trades, actually. It's the Rogers and the Helsley trade. And I've said this probably like 3 times already, but you can never have too much bullpen help. And Edwin Diaz, the Mets closer, he's really good, and he's not exactly who he was in his prime, but he's still a really serviceable closer. And then to add Ryan Helsley on top of that, who last year was an all-star, had 49 saves, and finished 9th in the Cy Young. And that's really, really good to be able to have that guy be your. I mean, Diaz is already a good closer, and then to add someone like that, Helsley has a 2.92 ERA this year. He's still having a good year. Not Obviously not as dominant as his 2.04 ERA from last year or his 1.25 ERA that he had in 2022, but he's still a top five closer in the game, and any playoff team will gladly accept a closer like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're very right, and like Diaz, not as much, but I mean, he has always felt like a Aroldis Chapman for me. It's like where he's like
Yeah,
really got his stuff, or he really doesn't. I mean, obviously,
yeah,
a couple, these past couple seasons have kind of been an example of that. And so for Tyler Rogers, the big thing with the Mets for me is not necessarily that they were struggling in the closer department. Obviously, spreading the responsibility is great, but also it just felt like the middle relievers were really struggling for the Mets, and that was really what was putting them in situations where Diaz and eventually now Rogers are going to have to come in with they're probably going to come out a lot
yeah,
earlier. That's the problem, like right, you want to bring your
yep,
closer out as late as possible. If you're bringing them in with
exactly.
in the eighth inning, which the Mets did a lot in the playoffs last year, they brought in
Hmm.
probably gave Diaz probably some of his earliest appearances, in a postseason game or a regular season game, combined. So how do you feel like the Nets have kind of improved to, either offensively where they're giving the pitchers enough cushion, or on the mound where these closers are not coming in with a crazy save situation on their plate?
Yeah, so I think that Rogers is going to be a really big part of that. He's never made an all-star team. He throws really slow. He, I, I mean, his hand basically touches the dirt when he's in his windup. Got a really funky delivery, but he has a 1.80 ERA this year. And the only time his ERA went over 4 was in COVID ball in 2020, but that that wasn't really a real season. Um, he pitched in 77 games last year. He's truly an elite reliever, and to have a guy like that uh, in a role where he's coming in the sixth or seventh inning, maybe the eighth inning, is able to get you out of those tough spots and get Helsley and Diaz clean innings. That's really big. And to have that guy have ERA the way um, Rogers does this year is really good. And his whip is even better. It's 0.86, which for a guy like him in the role that he has, that's perfect. It's the lowest whip of his career. Um, and he is 34, so he's a little older, but that's like you'll take that every day of the week and twice on Sundays for a team that's looking to make the playoffs and make some noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Mets right now, in a really tight race with the Phillies for control of the division. They've kind of just been, leapfrogging each other for the past week or so. Right now, they sit a half game out, and they're actually losing 5-0 to Cleveland. So that's not really helping them too much. But for you, I mean, how do these moves really help the Mets kind of get over Philly specifically?
Yeah, well, the Phillies are one of the most talented teams in baseball, if not like the second most talented team outside the Dodgers. And they got their own closer in Johan Duran, who is lights out. And for the Mets to match that with getting Helsley and then getting an elite setup guy, or I mean, he's not even going to be their setup guy, I would think. I think he'd be more of a middle reliever in front of Diaz. Like, that's really good. And in the postseason, pitching is like the number one thing that matters. Um, and you see every year managers be really, really aggressive with how they handle their bullpen, and to have a guy like Rogers and to add Helsley to already having Diaz, and then they also got Gregory Soto, who was an all-star a couple years ago. Not the same guy, but still a solid addition for a playoff team. Anytime you can add pretty high level bullpen depth, that's always going to be a plus, no matter how much you gave up.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, kind of wrapping up here, some really tight division races all around. I think the only division that's not within 3 games right now is the AL Central, because the Tigers are just just kind of blowing past everybody. They're 8 games up on the Guardians. Everybody else, though, first and second place in every division is within 3 games as of August 4th. So for you in this trade deadline, who do you feel like made the best moves to extend their run this year, and who do you think made the best moves to set themselves up for the next some really solid 5 to 10 years down the road?
Yeah, I think for me, for the present, it's a toss up between the Padres and the Mariners. I really love what the Mariners did with Naylor and Suarez to add to that really good rotation, but I'm going to have to go with the Padres just because right now they're 3 games out of the Dodgers, who everyone thought in spring training that they're like the best team ever assembled. But to add guys like Mason Miller and then not subtract from your major league team, and to have 4 all-star relievers, to have the depth that they do have in the starting pitching with Yu Darvish and Dylan Cease. And I know those guys haven't been themselves this year, but they have the ability to, if they throw 5 good innings in the playoffs, they can hand it over to an all-star each inning to shut it down. And that's a really special thing to have. And considering that they're in such a tight division race with the Dodgers, and then that they're in a pretty tight wild card race in terms of seeding with the Cubs and the Mets and the Brewers and Phillies, because those 2 divisions keep leapfrogging each other. You'll take all the bullpen help you can get, but the fact that they were able to add Miller and then not trade away Cease and Suarez like a lot of rumors said they were, I think that's a really underrated part of this deadline, and that they're definitely going to pay dividends for keeping both of those guys down the stretch and in October.
Yeah, absolutely. And then longer term future, who do you feel like killed it?
I would say the A's. I mean, anytime you're able to get the number 3 prospect in the league, who is he's a really athletic shortstop. He's 18 years old, switch hitter. Like, the sky's the limit for this kid. And you hate to give up a guy with 4 years of control in Mason Miller, but you got to do deals like that. And Miller, the A's aren't going to compete in the next 2 to 3 years anyway. But they have Jacob Wilson. He just got hurt. But they have him and first baseman Nick Kurtz, who I think are going to end up finishing 1 and 2 in Rookie of the Year. They have an exciting young outfielder in Lawrence Butler. They're definitely better than they were before they left Oakland. And to add in a guy like LDV to their pipeline, that's really good. Like, it doesn't matter if Jacob Wilson's going to be the shortstop down the road, going down the road for them, because DeVries is going to be able to play any position on the field. And the fact that he's just 18 and he's already the number 3 prospect in the whole league is really special, and you don't see a lot of guys ascend that quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And in 3 years, if everything goes according to plan, they should be in Las Vegas by 2028. So
Yeah.
How much do you feel like the front office was like, all right, let's start, kind of planting the seeds for what this 2028?
Yeah, I mean, that I didn't think of that. That's a good point. He's definitely going to sell tickets, especially if he can keep up being a top 5 prospect the next 3 years. I mean, I saw it firsthand with Roman Anthony. Like, the Red Sox had Anthony. top prospect this whole year until he graduated from the system. And, there obviously are growing pains with prospects and especially top guys who come up, but they're going to get a lot of hype around Leo when he comes up through the system. And especially if it's their first season in Las Vegas, they're going to get a lot of hype around that. And especially if guys like Wilson and Kurtz and Butler are able to continue their ascension into stardom, that'll only help them once they're in Las Vegas. Just having a group of guys who are young and successful and all-star level guys. I mean, Wilson was the starting shortstop in the All-Star game this year as a rookie. So the A's, to have that young nucleus at the major league level and then add in the third best prospect in the whole league, that's a really good trade deadline. And I think they're going to be exciting once they get to Las Vegas for sure.
Yeah, so a lot of prospect movement. That's kind of been the trend of this year's trade deadline. A lot of prospects coming for contenders that are coming from contenders that are trying to make moves for 2025. But we've seen a lot of seeds planted for 2026 and beyond. So thank you again for coming on. It's always great to have you. Always check out, if you're watching this, make sure you check out Ohm's coverage of the Tennessee Titans, the Boston Red Sox. We've got some really great stuff coming up where you've been kind of embedded in the New England collegiate baseball circuits.
Yep.
That's coming up soon on houseenterprise.com.
Yeah.
And plus, we're revving up our football coverage later on this week on this podcast.
Ready for that.
Oh, yeah. Jordan, Lauby, and I are going to be breaking down every single division over the next couple weeks. I'm sure you'll probably make your way onto a couple of those pods. College football is on the horizon. You should check out our House Enterprise Top 25 later this week. And make sure you just follow us at the socials that you see linked down below. We are on X, Instagram, Threads, YouTube, TikTok. Pretty much anywhere you get your social media, you can find House Enterprise. And that all links back to the great stuff that you're seeing on house-enterprise.com. So for Ohm Brown, I'm Sam Basel. This has been the Basel Pod, and we'll see you guys next time.